I gave my son-in-law the down payment for his auto shop. 22 years of double shifts at the plant. Every overtime hour I could grab. Every vacation I skipped. That was the money that opened the doors of Whitfield Auto Repair. And on the day of the grand opening, my daughter's mother-in-law told the caterer I was the man who parks the cars. I remember the morning Melissa called me about the shop. Her voice had that same crackle of excitement it had when she was 9 years old and won the science fair. "Dad, we found it," she said. "Want to get the old Sinclair garage on Route 9, 3 bays, good bones, perfect location." She'd married Tyler 2 years earlier, a sharp kid who could rebuild a transmission blindfolded but couldn't get a bank to look at him twice. No collateral, no credit history worth mentioning, just calloused hands and a dream. My wife Diane passed 4 years before that call, breast cancer, 11 months from diagnosis to the funeral. After she was gone, the house on Maple Street got so quiet I started leaving the television on just to hear voices. Work was the only thing that filled the hours. And when Melissa called about that garage, something in my chest unclenched for the first time in years. I didn't see it as an investment. I saw it as a way to still be her father, to still matter to somebody. The bank wanted a cosigner with real credit and real collateral, and I had both thanks to 3 decades of never missing a payment. $90,000 of my retirement. The number still makes my stomach turn when I say it out loud, but I didn't hesitate, not for 1 second. I sat across from the loan officer, a young woman with kind eyes, and I signed my name right below Tyler's, not as a guarantor, as a business partner. 30% ownership written in black and white because the bank needed real skin in the game, not just a signature. I remember the loan officer sliding the paperwork toward Tyler and saying, "Congratulations, you two, welcome to small business ownership." Tyler shook my hand so hard it hurt. He kept saying, "Frank, I'll never forget this. I swear on my life I'll never forget this." I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. I spent that whole first month there with him, unpaid, 7 in the morning until closing. I organized the parts, inventory. I painted the office a color Melissa picked out. This soft gray, she said, would look professional. I even learned how to work the new diagnostic computer so I could help at the front desk when Tyler was buried under a hood. My back ached every night. My knees complained, climbing in and out of the pit. But I'd drive home smiling because I hadn't felt useful like that in years. Tyler would clap me on the shoulder at the end of the day and say, "Couldn't have done any of this without you, old man," and mean it. I could see he meant it. That was 3 years ago. Time does something strange once you cross 60. You don't feel the distance stretching between you and the people you love until one day you look up and you're standing on the far shore wondering how the water got so wide. The calls from Melissa got shorter, then less frequent. I told myself it was normal. They were building a business, building a marriage. Of course they were busy. I didn't want to be the father who called too much, who hovered, who couldn't let his little girl grow up. But underneath that story I was telling myself, something else was happening, something I didn't want to look at directly. Tyler's mother started coming around more. Her name was Carol Whitfield, and she had opinions about everything, delivered in a voice so pleasant it took you a second to realize you'd just been insulted. When I'd stop by the shop to check on things, to see how the books looked, Carol would materialize like she'd been waiting for me, and she'd ask questions that weren't really questions. "Frank, don't you think a man your age should be resting more? Frank, are you sure you're not getting in the way of the professionals here?" She said professionals like I hadn't spent 2 decades keeping heavy machinery running at the plant, like my hands didn't know engines the way hers knew whatever it was she did all day, which as far as I could tell was mostly lunch with her sister and reorganizing other people's lives. Melissa started pulling away too, in small ways I told myself I was imagining. She changed the subject when I asked how the loan payments were going. She'd get a tight look around her eyes when I mentioned stopping by the shop. I brought her flowers on her birthday like I always had. I remembered her and Tyler's anniversary with a card and a check I told them to put toward equipment. It never seemed to land the way I hoped. There's a certain kind of pride, I've come to learn, that curdles into resentment the longer it has to remember being helped. I don't know if Carol planted that seed in Melissa or if it was growing there already and Carol just watered it. Maybe I represented something neither of them wanted to look at, the fact that this shining new business, this whole new life, had been built on an old man's retirement account. Tyler changed too, though slower, more painfully to watch. He stopped meeting my eyes at Sunday dinners. He'd get quiet whenever his mother was in the room, and I was too. He was choosing peace in his own house over standing up for the man who'd helped him build it. I understood, in a way. Nobody wants to be caught between his wife's family and his own conscience. But understanding something doesn't stop it from hurting. Then came the phone call about the grand opening. It was a Tuesday night in October. I was eating a can of soup standing at the counter because cooking for one had never stopped feeling ridiculous to me. My phone buzzed and it was Melissa's name on the screen, and my heart did that same little leap it always did. "Dad," she said, and there was something careful in her voice, something rehearsed. "We're doing a big grand opening for the shop next Saturday. Ribbon cutting, local news is sending somebody, the whole works. We'd love for you to be there." A grand opening. After 3 years of watching from the outside, they were finally, officially inviting me in. I didn't stop to question. Why now? Why this particular event? I just felt my throat get tight, and I told her I wouldn't miss it for anything in this world. I spent the whole week getting ready like a teenager before prom. I bought a new sport coat, navy blue, because I remembered Melissa once saying her father looked distinguished in navy. I got my hair cut. I polished my good shoes until I could see my own tired face in them. I wanted Tyler's customers, Tyler's community, everybody, to see that Melissa's father was a man worth being proud of. Tyler texted that morning, "Come around 1, Frank, before the crowd hits at 2. We want a few photos with just family before things get crazy." Family photos. I read that text 4 times sitting in my kitchen, and I'll admit it, I cried a little, the good kind of crying, the kind you don't apologize for. The drive out to Route 9 took 35 minutes, and I remember every mile of it, the fall colors just starting to turn, the sky that particular hard blue you only get in October. The closer I got, the more my hands shook on the wheel, and I could see the shop from 2 blocks away, balloons tied to the light poles, a big banner across the new sign that said, "Whitfield Auto Repair, Grand Opening." The parking lot was already half full. I found a spot on the street, gathered up the gift I'd brought, a set of hand-tooled leather work gloves I'd had monogrammed with a little wrench logo custom-made, and I walked toward the entrance with my heart hammering against my ribs like something trying to get out. I was almost to the front door when a voice stopped me cold. "Frank, sweetheart, the front's for the press and the customers. Can you just slip around to the back lot for now?" I turned around and there was Carol, dressed like she was attending a gallery opening, silk blouse, pearls, that same pleasant smile that never quite reached her eyes. I smiled back anyway, held up the gift. "Carol, I brought something for Tyler," I said. She glanced at it the way you'd glance at something the dog dragged in. "We're doing the family photo out front by the sign in a few minutes," she said, "and honestly we just need the walkway clear for the photographer's angle. If you could just circle around, that would be such a help." It wasn't a request. It was a woman moving a piece off a chessboard. I told myself she was stressed about the event, and I walked around the side of the building like she asked, past the dumpsters, past a delivery truck idling by the back bay, my new shoes crunching over loose gravel that wasn't meant for walking. When I came around to the side lot, I could see them setting up, a photographer with a real camera, not a phone, adjusting a group of people in front of the new sign. And there was Tyler's father, a man named Gerald I'd met maybe twice, standing proud as anything next to Tyler like he'd swung a wrench himself at some point in his life. Melissa was there too, in a green dress I'd never seen, laughing at something Carol said. When Tyler spotted me, his face did something I'll never forget, this flash of pure panic, gone almost as fast as it appeared, replaced by a smile so forced I could see the seams in it. "Frank," he said, walking over, hand out for a shake instead of the hug I was hoping for. "Glad you made it. Big day, huh?" He took the gift box without really looking at it and set it on a folding table with the other presents. "Lot of people coming," he said. "Gonna be chaos for a bit. Just, hang back for a few minutes while we knock out the family shot." I stood there in my new navy coat, in my polished shoes, holding my own hands because I didn't know what else to do with them. Melissa didn't come over. She was locked in conversation with Carol's sister, laughing at something, and I watched my daughter for a long moment, waiting for her to look for me in the crowd the way she used to look for me in the bleachers at every softball game she ever played. She didn't look. The photographer clapped his hands and called out, "Okay, let's get the immediate family together, parents and the happy couple." immediate family. I stepped forward, because wasn't I immediate family? Wasn't my name on the loan papers sitting in a filing cabinet not 30 feet from where we stood? But Carol's hand found my elbow before I'd taken 2 steps, gentle as anything, steering me sideways. "Frank, honey," she said, voice syrupy as church punch, "we're just doing Tyler's parents and Melissa's parents in this one, the core group, you understand." She actually walked me, toward a maple tree at the edge of the lot, its leaves gone orange and red, and she positioned me not under it, but behind it. "Just for this shot," she said, patting my arm like she was settling a toddler. "We don't want it looking too crowded." I stood behind that tree trunk with my heart cracking down the middle. I couldn't see the photographer. I couldn't see my daughter's face. I was hidden behind a tree at my son-in-law's grand opening, an event that existed because I'd handed over $90,000 of the only retirement I would ever have. I should have stepped out from behind that trunk right then. I should have said, "Carol, my name is on this business. I built this walkway you're standing on with my own 2 hands. But I didn't. 40 years of trying to be the reasonable one, the man who doesn't make waves, had turned me into somebody who could be hidden behind a tree and just stand there and take it. I watched through the gaps in the branches. I watched Gerald put his arm around Tyler, like the proudest father in the county. I watched Melissa smile for the camera. End quote. I watched my daughter smile for the camera while her own father stood 20 feet away, invisible. The photo session ran maybe 15 minutes. 15 minutes standing alone behind a maple tree, feeling something inside me quietly, permanently break. When they finished, I heard Carol near the drink table telling a cluster of guests how proud she and Gerald were, how they'd always believed in Tyler, how family sticks together through anything. Not one word about the loan. Not one word about the $90,000 or the 3 months I spent painting and organizing that shop for free. As far as that crowd knew, Tyler had built Whitfield Auto Repair out of nothing but grit and Gerald's blessing. I needed to breathe somewhere quiet. I walked around behind the building, past stacked tires and a row of parked customer cars, and found an overturned crate to sit on near the fence line. I put my head in my hands and I let myself cry, quietly, the way men my age learn to cry, without sound. And that's where I was sitting when I heard voices drifting over from the loading dock, close enough that I could make out every word, far enough that they had no idea I was there. It was Carol and Melissa, and then Tyler's voice, low and unhappy. "I don't understand why you even invited him today," Carol was saying. "He just stands around looking wounded. It's exhausting to manage." "My mom said he was hovering by the front door earlier like he owned the place," Melissa said, and something in me went cold hearing my own daughter say those words. Tyler mumbled something I couldn't catch. End quote. Then Carol again, sharper now. "Tyler, you need to grow a spine about this. This is your shop. Your name is on that sign. You cannot let that man make you feel guilty forever just because he wrote a check. He needs to understand that businesses grow, partners get bought out. That's just how it works." I sat perfectly still on that crate, my whole body gone numb. "Bought out," Melissa spoke again, and her voice had an edge to it I'd never heard directed at me before. "I just wanted today to be perfect," she said. "We worked so hard to make this feel like it's really ours. And having him wandering around just reminds everybody it isn't, not completely. It's like he's constantly waiting for a thank you parade." Tyler finally spoke, and his words went into me like a blade. "He can be a little much." "I know," he said, "but he did help us get started. We can't just erase the guy. Help us get started." 3 years of my life, my whole retirement, reduced to a phrase you'd use for a coworker who lent you $20 for lunch. Melissa made a sound that was almost a laugh. "He did what a father is supposed to do," she said. "That's not some grand sacrifice, Tyler, that's just what parents do. And frankly, we've paid him back plenty just by putting up with him showing up whenever he wants." Carol's voice cut back in. Satisfied, decisive. "Exactly. And that 30% on paper is just a formality from the loan days. Once the shop's profitable, we buy him out, quiet and clean, and then it's finally just yours the way it should have always been." I heard Tyler exhale, heard him say, "Yeah, I know, Mom, we'll figure it out eventually, it's just complicated right now." "Complicated," Melissa said, her voice climbing. "And it's not complicated. It's our business. Stop making excuses for him. Something in my chest went very still and very clear. The desperate, aching need I'd been carrying for 3 years. The need for these people to finally let me back in, simply left my body. In its place was something colder and steadier than anger. They hadn't just hidden me behind a tree. They'd been planning, for who knows how long, to erase me from a business I'd helped build with my own hands and my own life savings. My own daughter had called my sacrifice a thank you parade. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. That 30% wasn't a formality. It was recorded with the county. I had copies in my safe deposit box and a set in the glove compartment of my truck, because some old habit of mine had made me keep every important paper close for 40 years. They thought they were dealing with a sentimental old man who'd sign anything to keep the peace. They had no idea what they were actually dealing with. I wiped my face, straightened my new coat, and walked back around to the front of the building, not toward the crowd, by the sign, but toward a cluster of folding chairs near the entrance where an older man in a flannel shirt was talking with a young couple who looked like they were about to leave. I recognized him vaguely, someone from the plant, a man named Ed Coombs who'd retired around the same year I had and apparently knew the loan officer who'd handled the shop's financing. Ed was saying, loud enough to carry, "Isn't this the place old Frank Delaney put his retirement into? I heard he's part owner. Must be proud as hell today." The young couple looked confused. "Part owner," one of them said. Ed nodded. "Damn right," he said. "Talked to the loan officer myself, said without his credit and his cash this whole place doesn't exist. Banks don't hand 3 bays and a lift to a kid with no collateral, no matter how good he is with a wrench. Frank's name is on that deed same as Tyler's. Surprised I don't see him up front in all these pictures they're taking." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. This was the moment, whether I'd planned it or not. I stepped forward into view. Ed spotted me and lit up. "Frank, there you are," he said. "I was just telling these folks what a hell of a thing you did for your son-in-law." The young couple turned to look at me with new interest, real warmth, even. And that's when I saw Melissa, coming around the corner of the building, close enough to have heard every word Ed said. Her face went the color of chalk. Melissa hurried over, reaching for my arm the way Carol had earlier, except this time I didn't let myself be steered. "Dad," she said quietly, "can we talk about this inside? This isn't really the time." "I think it's exactly the time," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected, steady in a way it hadn't been in 3 years. Several nearby guests had turned to listen, drawn by the shift in the air the way people always are. "I think everyone here should know what this shop was actually built on," I said. I reached into my coat pocket and took out the folded copy of the deed I'd carried for 3 years like a talisman I hoped I'd never need. "I am a 30% owner of this business," I said, loud enough to carry. "I didn't just help out. Love along. I put my entire retirement into these bays and this lift and that sign out front, and an hour ago I was walked behind a tree so I wouldn't be in the family photo." A ripple went through the small crowd, the particular hush of people realizing they're witnessing something real. Carol appeared from somewhere, her face tight with fury. "Frank, this is not the place," she hissed. "This is exactly the place," I said, "because these are the people who are going to eat off the reputation of a shop built on a lie about who built it." I turned to find Tyler, who'd come around the corner and was standing frozen, his mouth slightly open. "See, Tyler," I said, "I want to speak with you inside. Alone." I walked past the folding tables of gifts, past the caterer arranging trays she'd probably been told I was just the man who parked cars, and into the little office I'd painted gray with my own hands. Tyler followed, pale as the walls. "Frank," he started, "I swear I didn't know they were going to do that with the photo. I didn't know Mom was going to say all that." "You didn't know," I said, and I let every bit of the last 3 years into my voice. "You didn't know your wife's mother was going to hide me behind a tree at an event that exists because of my retirement fund. You didn't know your wife thinks my sacrifice was a thank you parade she's already sick of attending. You didn't know your own mother is planning to buy me out quiet and clean the second this place turns a profit." He said nothing. He stared at the floor like a man waiting out a storm. "Here's what happens now," I said. "I am not disappearing from paperwork I signed with my own hand. You are going to buy out my 30% at fair market value, starting with a real conversation with a real lawyer, not a family strategy session behind a loading dock where you think nobody can hear you. "Dad, we don't have that kind of cash yet," he said, panic cracking his voice. "Then find it," I said. "I gave you a business. I gave you my future, and you let them turn me into an embarrassment to be managed. I am not your embarrassment. I am the reason you have a business at all." I walked out through the party, past the balloons, past the ribbon, still waiting to be cut, past faces that were starting to whisper. I didn't look for Melissa. I got in my truck and drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel the whole way, not from fear, from something closer to relief. The phone rang all that evening. Melissa, then Tyler, then Carol, then Melissa again. I let it ring itself out until the battery died, and I didn't plug it back in until morning. I knew exactly what they wanted: an apology, a quiet retreat back into being grateful and invisible. I wasn't going to give it to them. And the next day I drove to see a lawyer named Patricia Vance, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who'd handled my will after Diane passed. I laid out everything: the loan, the ownership percentage, the conversation I'd overheard. She read through the paperwork and told me the law was entirely on my side, that 30% recorded ownership couldn't simply be wished away by a family that found it inconvenient. If they wanted me off the paperwork, they would buy me out at fair value, full stop. When I got home that afternoon, there was an envelope taped to my door, Tyler's handwriting on the front, uneven, like he'd written it in a hurry or with a shaking hand. "Frank," it read, "I know I let this happen. I should have stopped my mom. I should have stood up for you at the photo. I've been a coward about this for 3 years, and I'm sorry. Please call me. I'm asking for a real chance to fix this. I'm asking." I read it twice, standing in my own front hallway, and I felt tears come again, but different ones this time, sadder than angry. Sad for the earnest kid who used to call me Frank like I was already family long before the wedding. But forgiveness isn't something you hand out because someone finally noticed they hurt you. It has to be earned back, slowly, and you cannot trust someone simply because they've shown you for the first time what shame looks like on their face. I folded the letter and set it on the counter, but I didn't call. Instead, I called Patricia Vance back and told her to move forward with a formal valuation of the business. Within 2 weeks, appraisers had gone through Whitfield Auto Repair top to bottom, and the number that came back surprised even me. 3 years of Tyler's hard work, whatever else I felt about him, had actually paid off. The shop was thriving, worth nearly triple what I'd originally put in. My 30% alone was enough to change my life twice over. I didn't care about the money, not really, not the way you'd think. What I wanted was for someone in that family to finally understand that you cannot treat a person like a debt to be quietly settled and expect him to stay silent about it forever. On the day the buyout papers were finalized, my phone rang again, and this time it was Melissa, crying so hard I could barely make out her words. "Dad, please, Tyler's parents are furious. They think you're trying to destroy the shop out of spite. Please don't do this." I listened to my daughter cry for a long moment, and something in me that had loved her unconditionally for 31 years stayed exactly where it was, but the part of me that trusted her, that had felt safe reaching for her, had gone somewhere I couldn't get back to yet. "Melissa," I said quietly, "I lost you the day you let that woman hide me behind a tree and said nothing. I lost you the day I heard you call my whole life savings a thank you parade. I'm not doing this to hurt you or Tyler. I'm doing it because I refuse to spend what's left of my life being erased by people I gave everything to." I hung up. The buyout went through within the month. Tyler had to take on a business partner, a longtime mechanic named Ruiz who'd worked there since the beginning and had actual capital to bring to cover what he owed me. I heard through the grapevine, the same grapevine that used to carry only good news about that little family, that Carol and Gerald blamed Tyler for the whole mess, screamed at him for not controlling me, as if a grown man could control a father who'd simply stopped agreeing to be invisible. Months went by. I didn't hear from Melissa. I didn't hear from Tyler. I started going to the senior center on Tuesdays, playing cards with a group of retired guys who didn't know a thing about deeds or buyouts, who just liked my jokes and my ability to lose gracefully at poker. I took up woodworking in my garage, made a birdhouse that looked more like a shed, made a second one that actually looked like a birdhouse. Slowly, the tight, cold place in my chest started to loosen. I realized somewhere in those quiet months that the only life I could actually control was the one I was living right now, today, in this house, on these terms. I knew, somewhere underneath it all, that things with Melissa would never look the way they used to. Some bridges don't burn all at once. They just get quietly abandoned until nobody remembers the last time anyone crossed them. But I also knew I had done something I hadn't done in 3 long years. I had stood up. I had refused to be a line item, quietly erased from somebody else's success story. One Sunday evening, nearly 7 months after that grand opening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it and Melissa was standing there, alone, without Tyler, wearing an old sweatshirt instead of anything fancy, her eyes red-rimmed and tired in a way I hadn't seen since her mother's funeral. "Dad," she said, "I don't have some big speech ready. I just have a question I've been carrying around for months, and I don't think I can keep going the way I've been going until I ask it." I nodded and stepped back so she could come in. She sat down at the kitchen table where she used to do her homework as a girl, and she looked at her hands for a long moment before she looked up at me. "That day at the shop," she said, "when Carol walked you behind that tree, why didn't you say something right then? Why didn't you just walk out from behind it and stand with us? I could have. I should have. I don't understand why you just let it happen. Why didn't you scream?" I sat down across from her, and I thought for a long moment about that 15 minutes behind the maple tree, the humiliation of it, the strange dignity I tried to hold onto by staying quiet. "Why didn't I scream?" I repeated softly. "Because I was waiting for you to see me standing there and come get me yourself. I was waiting for my daughter to say, 'Dad, come stand with us, you belong in this picture.' You never did. So when I finally did speak, it wasn't going to be a scream. It was going to be an action you couldn't argue your way around." She started to cry then, not the panicked crying from the phone call months before, something quieter and more honest. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said. "I let Carol turn me into someone who could watch that happen to you and say nothing. I've thought about it every single day since." I reached across the table and took her hand, the same hand I used to hold crossing parking lots when she was small enough to lift onto my shoulders. "Respect isn't something you inherit just by being somebody's family," I told her. "It has to be earned, over and over, and once it's broken, you don't get it back with an apology alone. You get it back by showing up different, again and again, until it's true." She nodded, wiping her face with her sleeve the way she used to when she was 7 years old and skinned her knee. And maybe, just maybe, sitting there at that old kitchen table with the porch light buzzing outside and the November wind picking up against the windows, something between us that had been slammed shut for months creaked open again, just a crack. Not forgiveness yet, not trust rebuilt, but a door that hadn't been there in a long time, standing open just enough to let a little light through. Sometimes that crack of light is all you need to start finding your way back to each other.